Yeah, thank you, Francisco. It's good to be here today. I have known Bert a long time and have been, I really want to thank this congregation, though. This congregation really gave me my start in Unitarian Universalism. I didn't know what Unitarian Universalism was until one day about 20 some odd years ago. I was chatting with a person who would become a friend, Evan Lefevre. Does anyone know Evan Lefevre in this crowd? Nobody? Yeah, Evan, he's passed away, unfortunately. But I said, Evan, you seem like kind of an unusual individual. What's going on? And he said, well, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I said, well, what's a Unitarian Universalist? And he said, well, my wife is preaching at the South Bend Church this Sunday. And I showed up. And for some reason, I got the idea that the service was at 10 o'clock, and I showed up early. And Evan's wife was there waiting with me at the door. For some reason, the building was open, so we had a nice chat. And I was able to get filled in on what Unitarian Universalism is. And eventually, I hope to understand. So at any rate, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about humor today and its importance, spiritual importance, about how humor can open us up and allow the creative to enter in and help us address the issues that we face today. After the service, after I preach, we did this at Buff, and I will try it here. We're going to open up the floor for anybody who would like to tell a humorous story. And it can be a humorous religious story. It can be really any kind of humorous story at all. And judging by the look of the congregation, you have a lot of funny stories. So I'm looking forward to what you might have to say. That's time, and we should have plenty of time for that. And that's coming up right after I preach. So thank you. And now Francisco will help us with joys and concerns.
And now for our joys, sorrows, and concerns. I invite you to recall
Of just the kind of books you love. There's a study group meeting there right now. Please proceed to your left. The priest arrives, and St. Peter says, Father, I'm so happy to see you. I remember how much you enjoyed celebrating Mass. Well, there's a Mass starting right now, and you are the celebrant. Please go to your right. The UU minister shows up, and St. Peter goes, okay, Bob, the potluck's down the hall. So you heard about the UU minister who, well, actually, when I was first in the ministry, it was my job I was a associate pastor at an 800-member church, and it was my job to do all the pastoral calling. And there was a lot of pastoral calling back in those days because you were expected to call on everyone at least once a year. And the first woman I called on was a woman named Geraldine, and she was 103 years old. And I went. It was this house was in this very stately, at one time very expensive houses in an older neighborhood. And the first thing Geraldine says to me when I get to the door is, "Pastor, I apologize. This was such a nice neighborhood when I moved in." I said, "Well, when did you move in?" She said, 1917. So she'd been there for quite a while. So last week, I found myself reflecting on the reading I shared earlier from the George Carlin one-liner. I put $1 in the change machine, but nothing happened, or nothing changed. I don't want to sound like J.R.R. Tolkien, but I believe there is a darkness moving through our land, a heavy, penetrating darkness that touches every corner of our society. Our broken politics are merely a symptom of a deeper spiritual malaise. We are in the midst of a spiritual struggle, and it is worth remembering that this darkness gains strength through lies, fear, anger, and outrage. Each time we give ourselves over to these forces, the darkness tightens its grip. We cannot throw fear and anger into the change machine and expect something brighter to come back. But there is another currency of the Spirit, humor. Humor, I believe, is one of the finest currencies we possess for buying even a small measure of spiritual breathing room. It allows us to release our grip for just a moment, long enough to slip beneath the iron dome of our social programming and glimpse the wisdom of our wild, sacred, connected to the interdependent web of existence selves. In that glimpse lies our resistance and our hope. And so today I want to share a few stories, jokes, and moments of lightness that help lift my heart. My hope is that they may lift your hearts as well. So you heard about the UU minister who was out on a pastoral call. And when he got to the door, an older lady said, "Please, Pastor, come in and have a seat. I'm working in the kitchen. I'll be with you in a few minutes." Well, a few minutes passed, and as the pastor was sitting there, he noticed some peanuts on the coffee table, and he started just absentmindedly eating peanuts like one does. And before you knew it, he'd eaten the whole bowl. And the lady finally comes back from the kitchen, and she says, "Have a seat," and then she's talking, and they're talking, and he says, "Ma'am, I gotta apologize for eating all your peanuts." And she says, "Well, no worries, the kids have already sucked all the chocolate off them anyway." So let's start with religion. Humor reminds us not to confuse form of our faith with the heart of it. For most UUs, the heart of our faith is authentic being. As one of our founding parents, Ralph Waldo Emerson, said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." Translation, to be a self is to transcend yourself, which fits beautifully alongside the Upanishadic idea that our truest task is to live from the self, that essence within, the Atman, despite the pressures of the outer world. In the Sufi tradition of Islam, we have the tales of the Mullah Nasruddin. How many people here have heard of Nasruddin? Anybody heard of Nasruddin? So I can make stuff up? Okay. Oh, you guys have. So, okay. So Nasruddin was an itinerant preacher, wandering from village to village, sharing his wisdom. Everywhere he went, people would gather to hear him talk. And always the people asked, "Nasruddin, how did you become so wise? Nasruddin, how is it you came to be so righteous?" And Nasruddin would always hold up his Quran and say, "Because I know what is in the holy book." Well, one day, while teaching in a small village, the questions came again. "Nasruddin, how have you attained such great spiritual understanding? Nasruddin, where do you find such moral discernment?" As usual, Nasruddin held up his Quran. "Because I know what is in the Quran." Now, it just so happened that the village fool was there that day. And the fool shouted out, "So, what is in the holy book?" And Nasruddin replied, "A pressed flower and a letter from my friend Abdullah." In that moment, Nasruddin did what he did best, a bit of spiritual jujitsu. He turned the question upside down. Instead of quoting scripture, he showed that true holiness is not only in sacred words, but in everyday life, in a flower pressed between pages, or in a letter from a dear friend. True wisdom and compassion live not in books, but in the small beauties we carry within us. Sometimes the most righteous things we can do is to notice a flower, our treasure of friendship. In these simple acts, the sacred comes alive, our hearts are opened, and we are real. And by way of footnote, Nasruddin was probably more of a legend than an actual person. And I'm guessing much more of a legend than an actual person. When I graduated from college, my grandmother gave me 2 ties in a set. One of the ties had tiny images of hunting dogs, and the other tie had images of the kind of horns you would associate with the English fox hunting. When I was a young minister in the United Methodist Church, I was serving a very conservative 2-point rural charge. It was the practice, too, after the service, for the minister to stand at the entrance of the sanctuary and shake the hands of everyone in the congregation as they exited. Pleasantries were exchanged. One day I was wearing my tie with the little dog images. The church pianist, a lovely middle-aged woman and stalwart Christian, as she was shaking my hand, noticed the tie and said, "Little dogs. You must have been feeling a little doggy today." We had a bit of a laugh. The very next Sunday, I wore the tie with the little horns. Oh, I don't need to read the rest of this? Okay. As she and I shook hands, she said, "I see you are feeling a little horny today." She smiled and walked about 6 feet, and realized what she had said, and just paused for a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, but then squared her shoulders and walked on. So, and then there is work. For most of us, an excellent opportunity for spiritual growth. I read the other day that a burglar was arrested while breaking into his own house. He was working at home. The guy who called in sick because he broke his leg raking leaves. The boss asked, "How in the world did you break your leg raking leaves?" And the guy said, "Well, I fell out of the tree." Meister Eckhart, the father of German mysticism and one of my heroes, once said, a human being has so many skins inside covering the depth of the heart. We know so many things, but we do not know ourselves. 30 or 40 skins or hide as thick and tough as an ox's or a bear's cover the soul. Go into your own ground and learn to know yourself there. End of quote. Eckhart's image of layer upon layer reminds us how easily we lose touch with what is most real within us. Yet when we begin to pay attention, really pay attention to how we think, act, and feel, even in the ordinary rhythms of work, something shifts, a space opens, the creative spirit finds its way in, and suddenly even the most routine tasks take on a kind of sparkle or a subtle thrill. Xi Ming, the third patriarch of Zen Buddhism, put it this way: before enlightenment, a man chops wood and carries water. After enlightenment, a man chops wood and carries water. Oh, what a difference. Humor, too, has this power. Humor cuts through those thick hides that weigh on the soul. It opens the heart and lets a little light slip through. Humor helps us show up to our work, not just with hands and mind, but with heart and soul. And actually, if I joked a little bit about trying to understand Unitarian Universalism, and it is a difficult religion to understand, but for me, the core of Unitarian Universalism is the freeing up from our this iron dome of social programming that sits on us, to at least to be able to get beyond it enough to experience that the mystery that we are, that every one of us is. We are this organism. How did it come into being? And I think that through ourselves we are fed from a much deeper stream if we allow ourselves to be. Which is, to me, as far as I'm concerned, the core of this religion, and really I think the core of most religions, although most of the time, most of us fail somewhat spectacularly at it. So let's take a peek at marriage. I confess that at one time I considered myself an expert on marriage. Then I got married, and now have very little to say on the subject, except that marriage, more than any other thing we do, has the greatest opportunity for spiritual growth. My wife and I have been married for 53 years. At my paternal grandparents' 65th wedding anniversary celebration, held in the little United Methodist Church where I grew up, my sister asked my grandmother if she had ever considered divorce. My grandmother said, "Oh, no, dear. I would never divorce your grandfather, though murder has sometimes seemed like an attractive option." So this guy wakes up with a hangover and a black eye, finds a rose on the bedside table and a note from his wife. "Dear, breakfast is on the table and I have gone shopping to make your favorite dinner tonight. I love you." The guy asked his son, "What happened last night?" "Well, you came home drunk and tripped over a chair and got a black eye." "Then why the rose and breakfast from your mother?" "Oh, when she tried to take your clothes off to put you to bed, you screamed, 'Leave me alone, I'm married.'" Then there is a wife whose husband says, "If I should die before you do, please feel free to remarry. Also, I would love it if you gave your new husband some of my favorite things, my tools, my car, my golf clubs." And she said, "Well, that's very generous, dear, but the golf clubs won't be necessary. He is left-handed." Can you tell that joke in a church? I don't know. So parenting kids provides plenty of currency for the change machine. When my son Brian was 11 years old, it was his turn to do the supper dishes one evening. I peeked into the kitchen and the dishes were not getting done. Brian was standing by the wall phone, leafing through the phone book. And this is when phones still hung on walls, and we had phone books. How many people here have a phone book? Have a phone book at home? Do you use it, ma'am? Or is it propping up some piece of furniture or something? No, we have no phone books, haven't had them for years. So I said, what are you doing, Brian? He said, I'm looking for the number of the child abuse hotline. Really? Yes, Dad, you are in clear violation of child labor laws. Oh, yes, you are causing me serious emotional damage by making me do hard labor. I opined that loading the dishwasher is not really considered hard labor. That night we did the dishes together. When my daughter Katie was 14, I saw her and one of her little friends duck into the Little League dugout near our house. They had not seen me. Curious, I approached the dugout from the back and listened. They were rolling a marijuana cigarette. When I suddenly appeared, they tried to play it cool. I saw the cigarette and asked Katie what it was. She said, it is a blend of Italian spices. So you've rolled a blend of Italian spices into a cigarette paper to smoke it? I asked, and she said, and I quote, there are many ways to enjoy the taste of Italy, Dad. Well, she gave me a lot of trouble. I confiscated the marijuana and sent the two of them to our house. I told them I was going to finish my walk, but Katie seemed to let her mother know what was going on, so I sent them to the house. Katie stomped off, and when she was about 20 feet away, she turned and angrily said to me, Dad, I don't care how hard you try, you will never break my spirit. And I said, I'm breaking your spirit a little bit right now, honey. I'm proud of both Brian and Katie. They did well in college and now have very good jobs and are very good people. And strangely, Katie is very solicitous of my well-being, although that might be from a little guilt. She wrote a part of a poem in the back of her closet in black permanent magic marker. And you know how hard that is to paint over. This is when she was about 13. And I asked her, well, honey, why don't you finish that poem? I'm curious. See, I just can't find a word to rhyme with Nazi. So humor, I think, helps us parent with a heart. It is a fact that most of us will die, and most of us will age, and all of us will die. This knowledge, not shared by other mammals on our planet, is important currency for the change machine. A couple of years ago, I was sitting with my then 5-year-old granddaughter, Isla, on my lap, her head resting on my chest, both of us tired from playing in the park. It was a golden moment, just sitting there quietly together, doing nothing. I thought she had fallen asleep when she said, Grandpa, do all old people smell like you? I said, most people have their own smell, honey. Then she said, well, I want to smell like you when I grow up. Well, maybe when you're old, like me, you will smell like me, I said. Anna then said, before I get old, I'm going to have babies, and I'm going to name them after you. I said, you're going to name your babies Jim? No, silly, I'm going to name them Grandpa. So here's my proposal. Heaven knows our society needs a lot of change. So let's try putting some humor into the change machine, the kind that opens the heart, loosens the grip of fear, and makes us remember we're all in this together. Because maybe, just maybe, if we feed the change machine with enough laughter, kindness, courage, compassion, and hope, we'll start getting some serious change back. And if it spits out a little wisdom too, that is just a bonus. So the next time life feels heavy, tell a silly story, share a ridiculous memory, laugh at yourself, and put some love in while you're at it. And when the change machine finally clunks, rattles, and spits something back out, maybe it may be just what you need to make your wild and precious life feel a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more worth living. So mote it be. And now let's have a moment of silence.